People are still joining. That's great to see good attendance today. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining. This is our good morning. My name is Dr. Ben Howdigi. I'm the board chair of the Inland Coalition on Aging. I also work at IEHB. I mentioned that in case I look familiar, most of you. We are going to begin with key points from on our agenda today. Welcome you again. Welcome to everybody. We appreciate you joining us today. We have a great presentation. I'm very excited to hear Tony Ortego from Riverside County Department of Behavioral Health will be speaking today on behavioral health and aging. So very informative educational presentation. I'm looking forward to that. I'm going to share some key points from our last meeting. Just want to recap some important points. And then at the end, we'll give you an IE Inland Empire Master Plan for Aging update. Since I do see some new folks here, I just want to mention a quick commercial for the Inland Coalition on Aging. We are a coalition of organizations, professionals that work in the field, also stakeholders that are part of leadership, part of boards and commissions are welcome to join this coalition. We meet monthly to work on projects that are going to improve the lives of older adults, adults with disabilities, and caregivers. That is our focus, to work on improving long-term service and supports, those services that are help folks to live independently in their home or community as long as possible. Similar to the goals of the California State Master Plan for Aging, we are also working on an Inland Empire Master Plan for Aging. That is our #1 project right now, so you'll hear a lot about that. But we have lots of work to do here in the Inland Empire to improve the lives and services of people with disabilities. So we welcome and thank you for joining us. I want to encourage you, if you're not a member of the coalition, that you can join by simply going to inlandcoalition.org and registering as a member. If you're receiving these emails, it doesn't necessarily mean you're a member. So please note there's a difference, right? I want to make sure if you haven't signed up yet as a member, please do so. We encourage you to receive, so you can continue to receive email updates and invitations to our conference. We are planning our annual conference in September here at IEHP in Rancho Cucamonga. We want you to be a part of that. So please make sure you register as a member, because attending the conference will be free to members and membership is free. So lots of good reasons why you should join. Let's move on to the next agenda item, is the key points from the last meeting. But before I go over the key points of the last meeting, I want to show you a quick video that I found online. Janelle, please play.
I mean, it's just really unbelievable. How do you feel, though, about getting older?
I think it sucks.
Oh, you're not gonna. What about all the wisdom? I'm sure. All right.
I'm different from Sharon.
How so? How so, Tina?
I have to say that I welcome it with open arms, because my senior life is so much better than when I was young. I am the wisdom, the way I think, my attitude towards things. It really, there is a change when you're still healthy and you still look good.
Yeah.
So your whole outlook changes on everything, and you're really happy. You don't mind being 68. That number doesn't mean a thing. It just doesn't. It doesn't mean a thing.
You don't mind being 68. That video just, it's funny, and then it's not funny because it's ageist. It's looking at the negative things about aging and doesn't focus on the positive things of aging, the many positive things of aging, and that we talked about in our last presentation. We talked about what is ageism. We define that as anything, as these bad stereotypes, negative stereotypes, bias against age, against aging. And so in order for us to counter that, we need to towards the end of the presentation, I talked about how we can enjoy happiness now, how we need to reframe aging, how we need to look forward to aging and really change our mindset, reframe how we think about aging. And hopefully that will then in turn change how we provide services to those who are aging. But these are some of the key topics. We talked about the aging stereotypes, and thank you for everybody who contributed to those. There are stereotypes in employment, in health, in work, in driving, in technology, using technology, so many negative stereotypes that we need to counter. We talked about how ageism touches all aspects of life, not just health, but also your social life and other aspects of life. We talked about ageist language that we use, and we need to be careful and mindful of the terminology that we use. We talked about reframing aging, and that's the big focus, and that's how we're going to change the thinking about aging and really just changing the way we talk, how we look at, how we, our perspective, our lenses on aging. And we also talked about enjoying happiness now. Like the gentleman in that picture, love that picture. Next slide, please. That was just a quick summary of the last presentation. I'm so excited to introduce Tony Ortego. He is with the Behavioral Health Services Administrator, he's the Behavioral Health Services Administrator over older adults at RUHS, a very engaged and active member of this coalition. I so appreciate his participation today. I'm gonna hand it over to him, but stay with us, and this is sure to be very meaningful, especially with the work that we're doing around behavioral health and identified need of the Inland Empire Master Plan for Aging. So thank you so much, Tony. All yours.
Thank you, Ben. For those of you who are not familiar with me, as Ben mentioned, I am part of our Riverside University Health Systems behavioral health here in Riverside County. I've been the administrator of this program for, I'd say, close to 12 years, since 2012. I've also had some other, held other titles, interim director for in-home support services with Riverside County, as well as deputy director over housing continuum of care and homeless continuum of care, and DPSS, Adult Protective Services Administrator. So all of these that I'm talking about lead to have led me to some engagement, some active participation in the world of older adults and mature adults. Aging is a wonderful thing. I want you all to remember one thing, at least one minimal thing that I've said today, and this is it. We should all look forward to, quote unquote, aging in. We don't age out of services. We should look forward to aging in. It's a phrase that I used back in October when we met at the Inland Empire, and Carmen and Ben and a few others have asked me to be one of their guest speakers, etc. I'm really an advocate for older adults, mature adults, both in the Inland Empire, San Bernardino, and Riverside counties. Why? Because it's one of our fastest growing populations. There are some statistics out there that by year 2030, older adults ages 65 and over will be one of the fastest growing populations and the largest population. It'll outpace children. So that's the predictions that's coming up. So you're going to hear me use some terms loosely referring to consumers or members of our services, or residents of our county is what I prefer. And sometimes we'll refer to them as mature adults. It's kind of an interesting political, more sensitivity way of categorizing our population that we work with. The state recognizes older adults as being 60 and above. We recognize geriatrics as being 65 and above. Most of the time, the word senior is used to refer to individuals that are 60 or 65 and above. Many of us, including myself, who are 55 and above, want to be considered seniors, right? It's a badge of honor, and there's some good perks that come along with it as well, including some of the things that our magazine highlights. So there's a lot of great things out there that we can look at and categorize ourselves, but at the end of the day, we're all aging into what should be a better time in our life. Ben, thank you for the video of Shara and Tina Turner. Tina Turner recently passed away, if I'm not mistaken, end of last year, beginning of this year. Last year, I watched a brief interview / documentary on one of the cable shows, and she was nearing 80, if I'm not mistaken, when they interviewed her. And she didn't look any older than what she looked at in when she was interviewed in the video that we just watched when she was 68. And I say look is not as in physical aesthetics, not on how we dress and carry ourselves, but the mind and the energy that she had. She shared some wonderful things, and I'm going to touch basis on some of them in regards to, how we view aging and how aging should be a wonderful time, not the end time in our life, but again, an aging in process in which we should be enjoying more because we have more life experience. So that said, I'm going to pull up a PowerPoint and let me know when all of you can see it. I'm going to share this PowerPoint with you. Let's see. Do the slideshow, and we'll go from the beginning. Let me know when you can see it. Let's take a look here. Here we go. And I think this is it. All right. Is the slideshow up on your screen?
Yes.
Excellent. Again, we're going to go through a brief slideshow. It's meant to provide some good information, statistics and information that's given from SAMHSA and the National Institute on Aging, as well as a lot of other government websites. The National Institute on Mental Health is one of them as well. There's a lot of great information on aging. And as Ben mentioned, there are a lot of stigma that's involved as well. So if we can recognize what the stigma attached to it is, and we can recognize what some of the challenges are, even though some of us in our audience may be above 50, as myself, or above 55, we should recognize the potential and the gifts that we have, that we've made it this far in life. So that said, we're going to go ahead and move forward. So starting off with aging and behavioral health, we're going to look at what's called life changes. And keep in mind, this PowerPoint isn't all inclusive. I just picked a few topics that Carmen and I discussed and a few others that I thought would be of relevancy. And I can always come back on future topics as well as team up with Ben or Carmen for additional agenda items. But life changes start often later in life for older adults. Typically, it's when we start transitioning from a job or a career, meaning our years of working are slowing down. Many individuals who go into retirement at age 60 and above pick up some additional form of work, whether it's part-time, 1 or 2 days a week, or sometimes to supplement their income or keep their benefits, such as healthcare, insurance, etc. They're kind of forced to return back to work. So often the first major transition for older adults, which can impact our lives, is retirement. Often it may be due to financial reasons, it may be due to physical or emotional reasons. And many times it's just due to feeling that we've worked, for 40, 45 years, 50 years, and we're at the point in our life where we want to enjoy and slow down a little bit. 1/3 of retirees have difficulty adjusting, unfortunately. Adjustment is a huge part of life, but keep in mind, for those of us who have worked for many, many years, slowing down on the work or retiring completely is a major adjustment. It's a major life change. And again, I want you to view it through a lens of aging in. Often the adjustments come due to reduced income. So that's hard to swing, especially in our current state here in California, where cost of living is extremely high. It could also be having challenges with children moving away. For those of you who are parents and myself, when our children get older, they follow their careers and their jobs and their relationships, which sometimes results in them moving away, far away, or if we're fortunate, commuting a period away. But nonetheless, they're no longer within the household often, and that makes for a difficult transition. And then there's the opposite, where children and grandchildren can return home. That seems to be a theme in the last 10 years, especially here in this state as well. We've heard of some of the programs, for example, the Office on Aging here in Riverside County, where they have services for grandparents raising grandchildren. Well, sometimes grandparents also raise their children while raising grandchildren as well. So again, coming out of retirement, but into a whole different role of being a double parent, not uncommon. Um, some of the challenges may also be due to new technologies and the way we communicate. So, for example, back in the day, when we would want to communicate with our grandparents, it was often either in person, or if they lived out of state or out of county, it would be via phone call, correct? Our parents or us, we would talk to them. Nowadays, they have many, many options, and phone calls are probably one of the lower options or least likely options to be used by our younger population. So some of the communication is done via FaceTime or some other form of video imaging, social media, texting, etc. And that can pose a real challenge. It's not only a challenge that it may be difficult, but an economic challenge in order to have the devices, in order to have the Wi-Fi set up correctly, in order to pay for the services, etc. Those can really be a challenge to some of our older adults. In addition to that, retirement may be due to physical health changes or challenges that may lead to more sedentary living. Most retirees, unfortunately, fail to maintain adequate exercise or to sustain good health. It's imperative. There are many many researchers show that those individuals who go into retirement with an active lifestyle and remain active, meaning physically and emotionally active, connected, have a better chance at having some longevity in their later retirement years. For those who go into a sedentary lifestyle, unfortunately, they have greater risk of having some emotional needs being unmet, as well as having some physical declines. Again, following up with life changes, we also look at relocation as being one of the major challenges in life for older adults as they go through their stages. Relocation could result in downsizing to smaller quarters or reduced burden due to reduced burden of upkeep, meaning they're going from larger homes where they've raised family and maybe have been fortunate enough to have great memories into a smaller living environment. Or sometimes they'll be moving in with siblings or adult children. It's not uncommon for older adults to move in due to either physical challenges or economic challenges with their children. And it's not uncommon for children to move in with the adults and for the children to become head of the household as well. There's also issues regarding assisted living. Relocation to assisted living can be really good for a lot of individuals because that may be a situation in which they can ease into transitioning from their independent to an independent home to remaining independent, but living amongst other people and having others check in with them and reestablishing some communal type relationships within the assisted living area. There's residential care, skilled nursing facilities. These are settings that may be due to physical, mental, or cognitive challenges that they may have recognized. Not all of us want to end in a skilled nursing facility or a setting that may be somewhat limited, but keep in mind, they're not always in a bad situation. And I'm going to give you a personal look at way back when I was young, many years ago. My grandfather, who at the time was 96 years old, he outlived his wife, his two wives. His first wife passed away some 40 years later. He remarried, and a second wife passed away, and he was in his 90s, mid 90s, living by himself in his own apartment. He actually looked forward to moving into a skilled nursing facility. He had a stroke on one side, so he had some limited ability, but he was able to walk and move, but there was some little bit of some impairment. My grandfather moved into a nursing facility with his two older siblings who were there before him. He was 96 and he had two siblings that were above 100. One was 100 and one was 102. He assumed the role of their caretaker, making sure that every day he would walk over to their rooms, check on them. The two older siblings were not that good, were not in that great of a physical shape, but cognitively, for the most part, they were there and they really appreciated it. And he said it felt like coming home. I remember the days back when he actually surprised my father as well as his other children when he said he was ready to move into a nursing facility. So again, shedding light, skilled nursing facilities can be a great place, but at the same token, it can also have its toll because of the declining health and the real need why some individuals do move in. There's often some information that's related to skilled nursing facilities. When people do move in, they decline quickly and rapidly. Not always a case of, that's due to the facility itself, but due to the physical or the cognitive challenges that they may have and what led them to be placed in a skilled nursing facility. And also within a skilled nursing facility, individuals often feel very isolated and very lonely. They lose that self of independence. So those are some of the challenges that they do provide. Again, many individuals, whether they're in a skilled nursing facility or they've moved or relocated to a different type of housing, suffer from depression or loss of that independence because, again, they feel that things have changed in a way in which may be difficult for them to respond. We also have to recognize that men respond less well than women, and I'll kind of leave that up to all of you. But there is some research that shows that's because women in their resiliency have a tendency to regain or to reestablish social supports or new social support systems. And again, feel free to interject or question any questions so far, any comments. No? Moving on with more life changes, then there's another stage of bereavement. So we looked at some changes of retirement, relocation, and bereavement in general. The loss of a spouse, partner, family, friends. It affects women and men. Mortality increases for men following their wife's or their spouse's death, whereas for women who lose a husband or a spouse, that is less clear and does not indicate any increase in their mortality rate. Therefore, women often outlive their male partners. Again, more life challenges. We did move on to continue to talk about bereavement. Issues of bereavement is something we have to look at. As we age or as we age in, our social supports and relationships do have a tendency to change. Sometimes we become less active in those relationships. We can't go out and see each other as often as possible maybe due to some physical challenges, etc. Our relationships tend to decrease because those among us pass away, to have a tendency as we get older to recognize that life will hand us some cards in which many individuals our age or older will end up passing away and will leave us somewhat feeling less connected. Some of the issues that we have that we may want to look at when we're working with an older adult who are in some life changes, especially around bereavement, whether it's loss of a loved one, a spouse, or their social support system or friends or relatives. We need to be aware of some of these things. And some of them can be, for example, sleep disturbance and anxiety. Those are two of the most common challenges or symptoms that we typically recognize for older adults who are going through a bereavement process. They're normal if they resolve within months without medication versus prolonged and overwhelming grief, which can become pathological as well. And when I say pathological, as in related to their symptoms. Symptoms that are typical of major depressive episodes can be feelings or urges to join the deceased in death. Can also have intense feelings of loneliness, shock, emptiness, or anger. Feeling of that loss that your friend, your loved one, your the person you cared about has left you. It's not uncommon for older adults to hear or see their deceased. When my mother lost her husband, my father, they were married for a little over 51 years. She asked me back in the day, she said, Tony, do you know I speak to your dad? And I said, oh, I said, do you speak to him or do you speak with him? Because there is a difference. Just again, checking to see if there was maybe some auditory hallucinations, etc. And she said, no, I just speak to him. I tell him good morning. I look at his picture every morning and I tell him good night. And I tell him that I miss him. And I said, Mom, I think you're in a good situation and that's rather healthy. I would be a little bit more concerned if she was hearing him. It's not so much that that would be a bad thing. And again, it depends on how you're capturing the moment or recognizing the moment. But hearing and seeing the deceased is not that uncommon, especially for an older adult who has been with a person for a very, very long period of time. It may also mean very different things culturally as well that we have to take into consideration. Sometimes what an older adult may report as hearing or seeing the deceased may be related to their memories. Not so much that they're auditory or visual hallucinations. That's a little bit more on the rare side, but feeling that they're connecting or reconnecting with them by remembering their voice and remembering things they would say and kind of conjuring up, what they may respond to if the older adult had a question and they may refer to their spouse as Jim, for example. Jim, what do you think? And just kind of replaying or rehearsing that person or hearing their voice tends to bring a little bit of that connectedness that they may be having some trouble letting go or accepting. Avoiding or reacting intensely is another symptom that sometimes older adults may have as they go through the bereavement process. These are intense moments which they're reminded of certain memories. And then there's a risk of increase of abuse of medications, other drugs, or alcohol to cope with the bereavement, to cope with the depression or the loss, when they're unable to re-engage or recognize that this, again, aging in has many different forms, but life is a continuous movement of passages, correct? And we won't live forever. Comments or questions? Is everyone on track? Yes? All right. Excuse me. Moving on to a little bit more barriers that we may take across. Ida, did you have a question? I saw your hand up.
No, I just put thumbs up, but I think that's a really good, it's incredible information. I work in older adults, but just hearing you say it like that and going over the bereavement process and the stages of grief and the uniqueness regarding older adults, ideas of isolation, it was just beautifully said. So if I don't say so myself, I'm complimenting you on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ida. And again, the topics that we're looking at, whether it's bereavement or relocation, or whether it's retirement, etc., I'm sharing with you some anecdotal and a little bit of clinical mix to help us understand that these are things that all of us are likely to go through, but we don't have to cringe and be afraid of these passages, correct? These are things as an adult that we will probably age into. And again, depending on how we respond and depending on certain circumstances, our physical and emotional states and well-being at the time will help us to identify how we're going to be impacted by these changes, which inevitably will occur. Some of the barriers to access, and this is where I'm going to get a little bit more of the audience participation. Barriers to access of services may include geographical distance or transportation, right? It may have something to do with the socioeconomic status, correct? Perhaps the older adult, as we age in, may not have a vehicle anymore. They may be unable to drive or have chosen to recognize that they don't need a vehicle. Vehicles are high upkeep, they're expensive, insurance, et cetera. There are a lot of things that come at a cost for vehicles, as you know, and for many older adults, when they reach a point in time in which they're willing to give up their driving, it may also impact their access to services. They don't have as many options, or may see themselves as not having as many options. But out there, there are many true options of transportation, especially when it comes to your healthcare provider. I think a lot of our older adults may not be aware that the major healthcare providers often help assist or provide transportation to medical appointments, et cetera, that are really important. IHP, Molina, United Healthcare, many of them will assist an individual who may not have that access or that transportation. More access barriers would be medication and side effects. As we age and become older, age in, we're more likely to incur some physical illnesses, right? Our body isn't as great as it used to be, but it doesn't mean it has to be in a situation which is debilitating. There are a lot of older adults in this country who like adults have some physical challenges, right? But as we get a little bit older, older adults tend to rely a little bit more on medication to address some of the side effects, only because chronic pain may be a major issue that they're dealing with. Again, anxiety disorders that may create some forms of insomnia, etc. So the side effects of certain medications, and sometimes many of them are on many plethora of medications. Here in mature adults for Riverside County, we have an average of 3 to 4 medications for every older adult that we provide services to. It's not uncommon, but these medications again have some side effects, or often have some side effects or compounded side effects. For example, drowsiness or sensitivity to hot or cold atmosphere, which may hinder them to travel, right? Often when we go to our doctor's offices or other offices in large buildings and waiting rooms, they tend to be a little bit on the cold side. Air conditioning seems to be overcompensating. And for some individuals, they may have a sensitivity to this. Again, hindering them or discouraging them for future visits, or to minimize those visits, right? When in fact, sometimes we should be encouraging to maximize those visits, especially if they're in a therapeutic nature. Another barrier to access of services is the service delivery. Service delivery systems are very complicated sometimes for us to navigate, regardless of which provider we have. Sometimes providers have such broad spectrum of services and things that we have to do, checklists that we have to go through to get the services, become very complicated. They're often not age friendly. As an adult, I can tell you that when I go through my healthcare provider, and if I need to change a provider or see a specialist, it's often not that easy, right? It starts with a phone call, and then you get your directory, your phone directory, press 1 for this, press 2 for that, get your service number, your member number out, put it in, it redirects you. It relies on some form of voice recognition for you to answer. It's really not that friendly. I'm hoping with AI and our AI improvements, which I'm very hopeful about, that artificial intelligence may hopefully improve in the very, very near future. And again, that's a topic that I follow closely, and hopefully I can share some AI advancements maybe in a year from now on things that we can look forward to. But looking at the service delivery model, not always easy. Here in Riverside County, the county has taken an initiative in the last year and a half to integrate our service delivery models, right? So we created a new department called the Integrated Service Delivery, and it's an ISD department in which is rolling out a new model. We started it with our community healthcare centers. We're expanding it into areas to Office on Aging, who has been a major partner. But these are some initiatives that's moving quite quickly statewide as well as nationwide on trying to integrate services trying to make them more age appropriate, age friendly, regardless of which age spectrum you fall into, and to help us deliver take away the barriers and deliver the services in a more meaningful and I think a more empathetic way. So perhaps Jewel and her team can give us some updates later on that as well, on that whole movement. And again, barriers to access could be cultural or language issues, right? That's a big one on my ticket. You know, when my grandfather was 96, as I mentioned earlier, and going through his life moving into a nursing home, I failed to tell you that he spoke very, very little English. French was his first language. That's pretty much what he knew, and that's how he communicated to his two sisters who were in the same nursing home. He was again 96. His two sisters was 100 and 102, and they only spoke French as well. So he was the mediator often to help staff understand what their needs were, but it gave him a role. But he's one of the very few fortunate individuals. You know, we have a large Spanish-speaking population here in the state as well as in the United States, and we have another 100 and don't quote me, but 116 different common languages just in California alone. So language is a really, really big issue. Culture is another big issue from accessing our services. And then again, I mentioned difficulty using technology, scheduling or changing appointments via the phone directories, the use of kiosk or check-ins at many healthcare institutions. Some of them are easy. You know, my provider, when I go in there, I tend to avoid the kiosk because I always see someone struggling with the kiosk. But I think it'll vary, and it'll vary for individual. But again, these are things that we need to kind of put on our thinking hats and say, how do we make it more age friendly, right? And age appropriate. So I'm going to pause and I'm going to ask all of you to help me identify additional barriers of access to services. Any thoughts?
Trusting a new program, a new thing. Like many of our older adults have had issues of trust with others, sometimes bad actors, sometimes just loss of independence and confusion about technology, like you mentioned. So sometimes it's a little bit more difficult to gain the trust of an older adult.
Good point. Absolutely. Any other thoughts about barriers to access of services that we can percolate on for a little bit?
When we did our master plan needs assessment, one of the topics that came up with particular concern to accessing therapy was the ability to access it in your preferred method, whether it be online or in person. Some people wanted in person, but they could only get online or over the phone, and vice versa.
Good point. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Others. Yes, Ernie.
One, extreme aggravation with accessibility, meaning it being there. The idea that you're not feeling well now, but somehow they can't see you for a month and a half, 2 months, is very frustrating, and you tend to discount it. The second thing is having providers that understand their patients, specifically within the veteran community.
Yes.
I will tell you, even now when I talk to my doctors, they have zero clue. And I'm like, you know what? I currently have the head of the department, and he simply does not understand veteran care or the things that, for instance, burn pit exposure. I may as well be talking Greek. And I know that when I was at the physical evaluation board representing soldiers, we had soldiers that were under cared for in the community. When we had a community-based treatment program where we would send them home with the idea that being around family they would get better care, and that was completely wrong. If you don't understand your patient, you are not talking. You may be speaking the same language. And I bring this up because we have a big veteran population.
Yes, we do.
And I've heard other people mention trust. Well, you know what? If you go there, I had one particular soldier, he just gave up. He was given a squishy ball by a therapist when they were talking about an IED accident, or it's not an accident, where a friend was killed and he was in a 2-month coma. And when he actually expressed what was going on, the therapist shut down. The therapist could not handle what he was hearing. So really, it's the care when you need it and the care for somebody who can provide it. Sorry about the long narrative.
Well said, Ernie. And again, when we're looking at aging and behavioral health, the challenges that many of our older adults face, again, is that linkage and appropriate health care, right? Just keep in mind, every fall, like many of us, our older adult population receives solicitations, both good and not so good, to change or look at other healthcare options, right? And it's really sometimes hard to navigate on what benefits that certain healthcare option may have. Ask a lot of questions is what I always say. But it's a time that can be very stressful for some individuals. So many of them will just choose not to navigate what's out there and keep what they have, and recognize that keeping what they're with their current provider doesn't always mean the services remain the same year after year. I have an aunt who lives in Moreno Valley. She's 89 years old, and she was quite surprised to find out this year that the healthcare provider that she's been with for the past 5 or 6 years and no longer offers a certain service. And she wasn't able to have her same provider that she's been seeing for a number of years. So she thought if I kept things the same, everything would remain the same, correct? But it changes. And again, it's a good example of a barrier for her wanting to seek more services. Other ideas or thoughts about barriers to access of services?
Tony, Ben and Lisa have their hands up.
Okay, well, there we go. Ben?
Am I unmuted? Yes. Thank you, Tony, for sharing this. And I just want to add to what was already shared. I think a lack of compassion is definitely a barrier to care. I'm actually reading a book called Compassionomics, the revolutionary scientific evidence that caring makes a difference. And study after study after study shows that if us, not just this is focused on the medical community, but it talks about social services, everybody. If we were just to show a little bit more compassion, we could really make a difference, not only in the health, safety, wellness, even the cost of the services that we provide, if we just demonstrate a little bit more compassion.
Great point. Compassion and empathy go hand in hand, right, Ben?
Yes.
All right. And do we have another hand up here? Was Lisa?
Lisa, yes.
Hi, great presentation. One of the things I think also is a challenge for people that have disabilities and as they age. So for an example, somebody who might have been born with their disability and they're going through the aging process, and then now they are in their senior years, and the challenge is, physicians parsing out what's disability. I mean, we're definitely not immune to chronic conditions. And so oftentimes don't get asked the same questions that might be asked by, another older adult. So it's very frustrating that when you can't get the tests that someone else might get. I mean, are there height adjustable exam tables, wheelchair weight scales, are all of these things? So we might not have access to what every other aging person might have access to. So that's definitely a challenge. And I can tell you that I speak personally. I am a wheelchair user, 62 years old, and it's very challenging as I get older because, you know, some things that I experience have nothing to do with my disability. But the fact is that I'm just older and aging. So I think that's also something that needs to be addressed.
Well said, Lisa. And I think there's a big part of that is the stigma, right? In that educational component,
Yeah.
that we need to help people to kind of reframe and understand that decisions of healthcare shouldn't be without such services that's based upon our age only, correct? Our biological age. I think Alma has her hand up. Thank you for waiting patiently.
Of course. I was just going to mention cognitive changes, impairments
Yes.
that interfere with an older adult's ability to process and just concentrate or focus on whatever's being presented to them.
That's important. And I've got a couple more slides, but we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about what seems to be some common things about aging and what's normal versus not so normal. Ernie, real quick.
Yeah, well, there's two things. As you've shared, I too am in that category of, I guess I'm a senior, depending on whose number you look at. But a lot of clients don't have time to get to the actual provider. And what I mean is, you mentioned the kiosk, the calls. It's incredibly frustrating. Honestly, I think a lot of people just don't have it. And particularly when you're not feeling well, the last thing you want to do is spend 35 minutes on the phone just to make an appointment to find out 2 months down the road. And then the other thing is providers that are almost fast food. I get that they only have a certain amount of time, but the lack of the inability, and it kind of goes with what I mentioned earlier, you got to know your patient. You got to be able to meet your patient where they are. You got to be able to communicate because, you know, like my provider, look, the dude's clueless about certain things, and educating my provider on what's going on, he's not going to take that time. It doesn't fit within his 15-minute window. And as a senior, well, as seniors in their 80s, I can't imagine people being okay with that. And they may just shut down. So our medical community is too big, too commercialized. It really needs to get back to the practice of medicine and treating patients and not treating somebody's billables. And it's really frustrating.
I think you've identified a huge barrier, and I totally agree. You know, what we can recognize moving forward is not so much that our healthcare industry and providers will shrink; they'll probably remain larger and larger. But there's an opportunity for us to do some education and some awareness directly with the providers, meaning some trainings, right? And these are some of the things that we can incorporate in some of the suggestions as we move forward with our coalition.
Well, Tony, I would say that, and I know you want to move on, but that their staff, because it's getting to, you may have the world's best provider, and somebody mentioned 5 years they had a provider. But if, you know, for instance, we had Beaver is in my area. Beaver was taken over by Optum, and that made a change. And it's not always a good change. Sometimes it is, but it's getting to your doctor. I mean, people know the people, the front office, people, and then that change. And that's difficult for somebody that is older. It's difficult for me at 58. I can only imagine at 88, that's got to drive somebody crazy. So it's compassion at the front end.
I totally agree. And we're going to talk about how Ernie's future life experience may lead him to a different perception as well. As Tina Turner mentioned, as we get older, as we age, as we accumulate more of the gifts that life has given us over the years, sometimes our ability to adapt increases because we tend to let go a lot of the things that we recognize or some challenges, and they're smaller. Often they're smaller. So let's move on and see what other options or what other discussion points we may have. I do know we're getting a little bit tight on time. We're going to talk about some common behavioral health disorders for older adults. And again, this is not the only ones, but these are common things that we have to recognize. For older adults who do get older and who have some challenges, depression and mood disorders seem to be the #1 challenge as the mental health spectrum is concerned. Dementia also poses a great risk factor for the development of psychotic symptoms or increased vulnerability of delirium. Doesn't mean that it's very high for those who are aging and may or may not have dementia. Psychotic disorders, non-dementia related, is fairly rare among older adults. It's rare among the adult population, but it remains rare among the older adult population. Typically, we see it when there is some form of physical brain impairment or cognitive brain impairment, such as dementia and Alzheimer's, kind of in their later stage. Other common behavioral health disorders are anxiety, and believe it or not, substance abuse, opiate abuse, alcohol abuse, and or dependency are two of the higher ones among older adults. It's not uncommon for many older adults to be on lots of pain medications that are opiate related. There seems to be a movement to try to move away from that. But we have come out of the last 20 years where opiate medications were prescribed at this higher rate in history, and providers are trying to wean off of that and looking at other options that they may have to address chronic pain management. But anxiety is another one, and anxiety due to, again, life changes, not knowing what to expect. And unfortunately, a lot of older adults who do isolate don't have that opportunity or don't see that they have the opportunity to educate themselves or to increase those coping skills. And there are a lot of opportunities out there, a lot of agencies, but we as providers need to help them understand what's available and to provide them services, whether it's in the home or in the field or at certain locations such as community centers, and give them more of an option than just coming into the physical brick and mortar outpatient clinic. Some of the symptoms of behavioral health as we age, again, we talked about increased isolation, decreased motivation or interest or pleasures that they once enjoyed. These are the things we need to keep an eye open for our loved ones or for those that we recognize as older adults and we're connected well to them. Decreased appetite, hyper or hyposomnia, so those may be sleeping too much or not sleeping enough. We have the issue of increased forgetfulness, unable to remain focused, and increased fear or worry. And we're going to talk a little bit more about forgetfulness, and forgetfulness is not a bad thing in life, right? It allows us to do a little bit of spring cleaning on a daily basis on some of our thoughts. How to help. When we recognize that an older adult or ourselves may be challenged with some of the symptomologies that we just discussed, some of the options that we can do or can offer to our neighbors, our friends, our loved ones, or those we care for, is a listening ear and support. It's amazing, as Ben mentioned, exercising compassion and empathy, how far that will go. And the power that it has behind it. Giving a gift, the gift of giving, I should say, is probably one of the biggest things that can improve our impact on life, meaning how we view life and how we perceive life is one thing. But if you want to change your mood and change it quickly, learn to be a giver. If you're a giver, and giving comes in all all sizes and all forms, and sometimes it can be that compassionate listening. Use of friendship lines are available. There are several great friendship lines out there that we often provide to older adults who do want to speak to someone after hours. Identify options and resources for professional help or assistance. it's really important that we try to help older adults understand their benefits that they may have through a certain healthcare provider. Healthcare providers now offer an array of such great services. It's just impressive, but many of them may not be aware of what's out there. Encourage or assist with follow through medical appointments, helping our older adults to remember those appointments or to keep them. Often they're feeling fine at the moment and they may say, I'm feeling fine. I really don't want to go on my annual physical or my 6-month checkup. Help them to remind that it's a wellness checkup. We want them to continue to be well. So it's important that they keep these follow-ups. Also practicing mindfulness, being aware of the present moment and to reconnect with feelings and thoughts. Now, that's not a tricky one, but it's one that's often undervalued. For many older adults, as we age, we become less temporal. We become often more, I don't know if the word tolerant is a good word, but we tend to, again, not sweat the small stuff so much because our life experience has taught us so, hopefully. But we also try to remain in the moment, meaning if we want anxiety to be down, if we want to recognize that there are a lot of pleasures in aging in, we need to live in the moment and to be mindfulness of our present surroundings and things that we do have, the practice of gratitude, correct? And again, help identify past and possible new interests. As we age, our interest will change because our hobbies may change as well, right? If I'm in my 30s and 40s and I used to enjoy running, 2 to 3 miles a day every morning, well, perhaps when I'm in my 70s or 80s, it may not be possible, but perhaps I can walk or join some other activities or engage in other activities. Or jog a little bit, do a little jogging and walking. There's a lot of different options, but it's important for us not to hold on what we've lost, but to identify those options that we have and that we may not be aware of. Why is behavioral health important as we age? It's
Tony,
important that, yes, Ben.
I'm looking at the time and I just want to make sure we have time to summarize and also maybe take one last question and then do a few of the closing comments. Is there anything on this slide that you'd like to just quickly touch on? Can you hear me, Tony?
I sure can. Yes, and I think we need to touch on that. It's extremely important that every stage in life we're going to go through these preventative measures are important. Proper nutrition, healthcare, avoiding smoking or alcohol abuse, and connecting with others through social activities and sufficient sleep are imperative, regardless of what age we're in. It doesn't stop. On that note, Mr. Ben and others, my apologies for running over a little bit, but is there any final questions, comments, things you'd like to have more of or less of?
Tony, I wish we could have more of this. I'm ready for another hour of this discussion and this learning. This has been so helpful. Thank you so much. But we will definitely have to bring you back at another time and let's have this continued discussion on this very important topic. But questions from the group? Well, I think this was, again, a fantastic presentation. Thank you, Tony. Very timely and very applicable to the work that we're doing here at the ICA. I want to thank you again for your time, for sharing this important information. And we got to figure out to continue this presentation. It was just amazing. And I want to make sure we give you the time available. So we'll figure out something. I'm sure this will be woven into all the other work that we're doing with the MPA. And so we'll definitely continue this discussion. But I want to remind everybody on the call, thank you for joining us, first of all, and for being a part of this monumental work of bringing the two counties together and developing an Inland Empire Master Plan for Aging. I don't know if you're as excited as I am to know that the work is being done to develop a blueprint for the Inland Empire, and that we've actually received several comments of from other parts of the state, positive comments on the exciting work that we're doing here in the Inland Empire. So I just want to thank everybody who's a part of this. Thank everybody who put this on. And last thing, please make sure that you join the coalition. Because you're receiving these emails doesn't necessarily mean you're a member of the coalition. I invite you to join. There is a QR code on the screen. We'll send it out via email, but please make sure you join, because that's going to be critical for you to attend the conference that's coming up in September for free. If you don't join the coalition, if you're attending these meetings but don't join, there will be a fee. So it's very simple to join. Just give us your contact information and we'll add you to the list as an official member. So I want to thank you. Don't want to keep you any longer. Thank you so much for being a part of the work that we're doing here with the Inland Coalition on Aging. And thank you again to our presenter, Tony. Appreciate your time. We will let you go now. Hope you have a good rest of the day. Thank you, everyone.